Okay, in this video I'm going to introduce object-oriented programming, or OOP for short. Object-oriented programming is a paradigm of programming that basically thinks of things within the program kind of like real-world objects, like say a car. So a car in real life would have physical properties like the paint color, how many tires, how many doors, those types of things. But it also has then actions or methods, things that it can do, like it can drive forward, it can drive backwards, turn left, turn right. So our objects that we create will contain the same thing. They'll have properties, things about it, and then they'll have functions or methods, things that they can do. This is as opposed to functional programming. Most of what we've been doing so far is functional, and that's just creating functions to do everything. So those are probably two of the most commonly used programming paradigms. So a couple more terms that we're going to need to know. One would be classes or a class. So a class in object-oriented programming can be thought of as a template. So it's a template that is used then to create all of our objects, and that's template, it's a template that contains both the methods and the properties from which the object will be created. And then the definition of an object, it gets a little bit more complex than this, but for right now, just thinking of it as an instance of a class will at least be good enough, and then we'll add to that in the future. So let's create a class that we can then make an object from. So I already talked about car, so let's make a class called car. So class car, and then curly brackets. Now when I created my class, notice that I used a capital C. When we create methods or functions, we generally use lowercase. When we create classes, we use capital. That just makes it easy to tell the difference. And notice the part that's missing here from when we do functions. When we do functions, we use the function keyword, but then we also include the parentheses after the name. We don't do that with the class. All right, so then we need to create a constructor. So a constructor is what is used to initialize or build a new object. So to create a constructor, we use the keyword constructor. And then that constructor contains all the properties. So with our car, let's say we have like a make, model, and a year. So those would be all properties. Obviously there would be a lot more to a car than that, but for our purposes this will be good. So I have a constructor, make, model, year. That means when I make a new car object, I'm going to need to provide a make, a model, and a year for that car. And then this is going to look a little bit weird, but inside the constructor we have to do this dot make equals make, this dot model equals model, etc. Okay, so for each of our properties, whatever properties you have in the constructor, we do something like this. The this keyword is basically saying that this particular make, and this will make a little bit more sense in a few minutes when we start making some cars, but since we can make multiple objects based off of this template, well, this is going to set the make for this particular one. So if I make a Ford or a Chevy or a Jeep or whatever, then I know that this make equals whatever make gets sent, this model equals, etc. So once again, that'll make a little bit more sense here in a second. So actually, let's just go ahead and jump down and make a car. So now to make an object based off of our class, what I do is I do something like let car1 equal new car, and then the parentheses, and as soon as I do that, you can see here how it's now saying, okay, you're making an object called car. I recognize that this needs a make, a model, and a year. That's coming from our constructor. So make, let's say I do a Chevrolet, and we'll do a Camaro, and let's say I do a 2018. Okay, so now what I've made is an object based off of the template. So the class is the template, provides the structure for our objects, and then we can create multiple objects from that class. And I could create another one. Okay, so now I have two different cars, both based off of this class. So these are two different objects. So with those objects, I can access properties by doing something like this. If I were to say document.write car1.model, what do you think that's going to write out? Well, if you guess it's going to write out Camaro. I did model, not make. If you guess Camaro, you're correct. It's going to get car1 model. Well, the car1 model is Camaro. So if I run this real quick, bring that screen in here, zoom in some, there we go, Camaro. Change that to car2.model, refresh, bring it back up, there we go, Highlander. So I use the dot operator between the name of the object and the property, and that's how I can access the properties within it. I can also then create methods or functions inside of my class. So going back up to the definition, it says it's a template that contains methods and properties. Right now I just have the properties. If I want to create a method, that's creating a function, but creating the function is going to be just a tad bit different. I don't use the keyword function. So let's say I wanted to write a function called like getAge. So it's going to return the age of the car. If I try to use the keyword function there, I'm actually going to get an error. So when I create the method or the function inside of a class, we omit the keyword function. So I just do everything else the same though. So getAge. Well, how would I get the age of the car? Well, technically I should do something like getting the current date, but I'll just assume for the purpose of this video, since it is 2022 and I'm creating this, that I'll get the age simply by returning 2022 minus the age of the car, or the year of the car, so year. But when I access a variable or a property within the class, I need to say this dot year, not just year, because once again, I want the model, if I'm doing car1, I want this particular year for whatever object that is. If I'm talking about the Highlander, well, I want this one. So we use the keyword this in front of our variables. So now let's use our method and do car2.getAge, and I call it just like I do any other property or function that we've done before, using the parentheses. So car2.getAge should return 2022 minus 2005, and there we go, the Highlander is 17 years old. Okay, so that is kind of an overview of how we would create objects based off of classes. And once again, the class is just that template, and we can create as many objects as we want to from that class.